Welcome back to Coats in Conversation. I'm your host, Kendrique Coats, a therapist for couples and athletes in Illinois and Alabama. And I'm also an athlete mental health advisor for the Illinois High School Association. In today's conversation, I'll be speaking with Josh Kauten, former Illinois State University baseball standout who was then drafted by the Detroit Tigers. And he is now the owner of K's Training Academy, one of the premier baseball training facilities here in central Illinois and throughout the state. At the beginning of our conversation, we dive into Josh's experiences as being a former elite athlete. And then we talk a little bit about how difficult it is making that transition from retiring from sports. Later on in the conversation, we talk a little bit about athlete mental health and some of the things that parents should be on the lookout for when it comes to their student athletes. One of the things that stood out in this conversation was one of the quotes, and he said, a lot of athletes like the idea of being a college or professional athlete, but don't want to do the work. And I think this stands out in a lot of sports. Sometimes athletes have this desire to play at the highest levels, but they're not putting in nearly enough work to get to that level, which, Josh highlights that in this episode. I really enjoyed this conversation because Josh has seen it on both sides, not only being an elite athlete, but now being a coach. I truly think that if you're an athlete, if you're a parent, or if you're a coach, looking to get more insights on what it takes to be an elite athlete or what athlete mental health even means, we highlight some of those things in this conversation. Be sure to like and subscribe to Coats in Conversation on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. And I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did having it. Josh, I was thinking about our conversation today as it relates to athletics, baseball, mental health, all of the things. And you've played baseball at the highest level, and you've seen just the different levels of competition there are out there. So for the work that you do with the athletes that you train now, what is one of the main things that you often see athletes miss when it comes to their own development?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I was around it as a player. Didn't quite reach the goal of the big leagues, but was around a lot of guys that, for one reason or another, maybe didn't make it, but a lot of guys that did make it. In terms of what the athletes miss or don't miss, there's more information out today in this age than there ever was when I played. And so it's almost like this day and age, sometimes players have too much information. Whereas back when I was playing, we didn't have enough information. So it's kind of that fine balance. And I think the real art, it's all science and data driven at this point, but I think coaching is still an art. And so I think the organizations and the players and the coaches that are going to have the best success are the ones that can distill down the complicated and deliver it to an athlete in a tangible way that they can actually use the information, not have to overthink and go apply it versus having to either one, not get any information and being super quote unquote old school and, none of it matters and data sucks. And, that's not that day and age is dead. And if they're still on that boat, they're way behind. So trying to find the sweet spot of one, how do I take that information, give it to an athlete and let him still be an athlete and compete, but also find the human element of what's the player going through, what's he internalizing in his brain, where's he at in his life, and just kind of putting the whole picture together. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but I think it's the organizations that do it the best find a way to make the complicated simple and give it to an athlete in a usable manner.
I like what you said there as far as the information, because even when I was competing, I didn't play baseball, but there was nothing. We grew up with flip phones and MySpace. So if that gives you a little bit of context of the era of sports that I played in, to where now you can jump on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and there's just every video that you want or need, it's there. For you, you've got a premier baseball facility, K's Academy in Bloomington, Illinois, that trains some of the top athletes in the area. Why is your work so important to you?
The old adage of those who can't play coach comes around. And same as you, man, I grew up, I graduated high school in 2000. So Y2K, we thought the world was going to end. I was really good at Snake on my Nokia brick phone. So I can relate to some MySpace. Yeah, I mean, I think, my goal, my dream was always to make the big leagues. Fell a little bit short. But at the end of the day, you get a passion for starting to help other people. And kind of the motto is always, leave the game better than you found it. So everybody kind of learns through their mistakes, and that's how a lot of people get into like physical therapy, right? They get hurt, someone they get interested in it, they become an orthopedic through their experiences. So similarly, I had some ups and downs in my career. By no means I probably outperformed my physical ability, my talent from what I probably was as an athlete, but also felt like I should have been higher. So, just trying to take what I learned, what worked for me, what didn't work for me, what could I have done differently. I think every athlete always reflects back on their career when it's over and they think, what could I have done different? Shoot, I should have done this, or I wish I wouldn't have done that. And so, kind of looking back at it is, I just wish there were some very head scratchy things that I was coached to do as an athlete towards the end of my career that I think now, knowing what I know now, I was suspicious of them, but you listen to the experts, so to speak, and so just taking the information that and the passion that I had for player development and human performance is really kind of what drives me.
Did you always have that passion or that drive to play at an elite level when you were younger?
Yeah, it was super irrational. Like I was not very good. I was a high school, like I was the number 4 pitcher on a high school team of a town of 5,000. So, as a senior in high school, I think I was like maybe 82, 83, 6'3", 165 pounds, like soaking wet. I literally have eighth graders and freshmen that throw harder than I did as a senior. And so to be a number 4 pitcher on a very small but very good, but small team. You probably shouldn't be very good and you probably shouldn't have played professional baseball. So I don't know. I just always felt like I was supposed to do something better and I was just going to make it somehow, some way. And whether that was outwork the next guy, it had to be outwork because I wasn't talented enough. I just kind of always saw myself having a chance to play professional baseball, even when I probably shouldn't have. Again, partially irrational, but sometimes you got to be a little irrational to make it.
I think I can't remember what quote I've heard. I think there was like a motivational speaker that I was listening to, and he was talking about how when we want to be great, there does come a level of delusion that I think we have to have. And I 100% agree with that because there are times during our journey where there are roadblocks or people who dismiss the ideas that we have or the naysayers that say, oh no, dude, you can't do that. And so, yeah, there's some sort of delusion that's necessary. You've been able to see it from both lenses as an athlete and now a coach. Is there anything that you would have been more intentional about while you were an athlete during your playing career?
As a player, I think, in terms of being intentionality, the thing that I can look back and go to sleep and knowing that there's not very many people that outwork, if any, because it was the only thing that I hung my head on is I kind of had a chip on my shoulder, was always the underdog, probably shouldn't have, gotten where I got, but just kind of outworked everybody. I'm sure there were people that worked as hard as I did, probably harder, but I tried to be first in everything. I would destroy my sisters in Monopoly. I tried to win every sprint. I tried to win everything, no holds barred. Even now as a dad, I very, very, very rarely let my kids beat me in anything. Hey, if they want to win, they got to earn it. So, I mean, from that perspective, I think I can sleep good on that. But I think the importance of the outside of the work perspective, I mean, the workouts, the arm care, the running, the preparation, like got it, had all of that. The things that I probably didn't do a very good job on were like sleep, hydration, nutrition. Some of that stuff I probably could have done better on for sure. Maybe more recovery, maybe not always pressing the envelope, maybe taking a recovery day, just more of that side of things I probably could have done a better job on.
I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today about the mentality of, I don't know, I think just wanting to be great at what it is that we do. Sometimes that off switch is it's hard to turn it off. And I don't know if that's just the stimulation of everything around us, social media, people, music, etc. But the other thing is, that fear of missing out. Am I going to miss out on an opportunity, or am I going to miss out on making this athlete better if I don't give my all? So I want to bring in the athletics side of this because I think it's important because as I mentioned earlier, you've seen both sides of this. So a lot of athletes talk about how difficult it is to transition from sport to regular life. How'd your identity shift from athlete to coach to husband to father?
Of all the things I've probably had to do, that's honestly probably the hardest thing I've ever done because as an athlete, there was just it was no plan B. It was burn the boats. I couldn't think about plan B because if there was a plan B, it means I wasn't all in on plan A, and it was all in mentality, right? So, I slept on an air mattress for 5 years. I was literally the joke in college. After college I was the guy on couch, but I wasn't on a couch. I was on an air mattress. Slept in apartment 17 here at ISU. We had 7 roommates in a 4 bedroom apartment. So you can imagine what 7 male in a 4 bedroom apartment looked like. Possible. I mean, I worked crap off season jobs just so I could afford to play. So I think I was all in. I was going to make the big leagues or bust. And ultimately busted, I guess, if you use that as the measuring stick. But once you're done playing and you really just don't have much of an inner or a direction, you know what I mean? Where it's like everything you are as an identity is you're a baseball player, a professional baseball player, and now you're not. You get out in the real world and you think people are going to want to hire you. Like, yeah, I used to be a professional athlete. I'm signing autographs for kids, like kind of a big deal. And then you go to get a job and they're like, oh, you're 28 and you have no actual job experience. I need 3 years of experience to get this job. And nobody wants to hire you. So it's kind of a culture shock. It's a slap in the face. Even to this day, it's still kind of like, man, professional baseball. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things. You just ultimately accept the fact that now you get to help more people versus just yourself, or your group of small team, I guess you could say. But yeah, I mean, making that transition from player to real world transition is tough thing. And it's something that we talk about is, with my other teammates, that as they kind of go through it is, what are they going through? And, guys don't ever really not necessarily share what they're going through, but it's a tough thing to kind of go from it. That's who you are as a person and identity to now you're not. So it's important to kind of keep your life outside of baseball going, or outside of sport or whatever it is. So you don't lose who you are.
Were there specific things that you did that helped with the transition of your new identity of not being an athlete, but more coach, father, husband?
Yeah. I mean, I think I probably lied to myself. So I took a job. The college baseball program was just starting as I was finishing up my career. I had some nerve damage in my elbow. It wasn't structural. I was convinced that if I got it surgically repaired, I would be back to old form and I'm going to get signed. And so I kind of took the coaching job as like selfishly, like, all right, I can stay in baseball. I can help these guys out, but also now I've got built-in catch partners and, I can train. I got catchers. Like, this is going to be great. And I'm going to get back to shape. This will be like a 1, maybe 2 year thing. And I'll be back. And at the end of the day, I loved it. I loved coaching. I was all in the competition side and how we can kind of help players get the most out of themselves. And I never got back to a form where I thought it was worth it at 28, 29 years old to jump back into the baseball realm. At that point, I was getting married. Towards the end, I had a kid on the way type deals. It didn't make life sense to go back into the minor league grind, as it were, at that point. So yeah, I mean, I think the transition was probably a little bit of fallacy of where like, all right, I'll just do this in the interim, and then you look up 5 years later and you're like, oh yeah, I guess my career is over.
It reminds me of I used to play in rec league basketball, and it's like the older guy out there or teammate out there who thinks they still got it, they still got that college level or professional level
Yeah,
athleticism, and then I talk to them and they're like, on the next day, and they're like, oh man, my body's hurt and I can't move. I'm like, dude, you
yeah,
can't play professionally.
yeah,
But the point to identity, I think it's something that I also experienced too. I thought I was going to go on and play D1 football. I had this desire to want to play for USC. I'm 5'8". There's no way that USC was ever going to look at me. But the type of delusion, as I mentioned earlier, but I think the struggle likewise was who was I after I played? Who was I? Couldn't go to parties or functions or events and say, "Hey, I'm the football player." It's now just I'm me, and that was hard to deal with because it was just kind of my ego was hit. I'm like, nobody recognizes me as just me. They knew me as a football player, but which goes into the mental health aspect of things. I think, as you mentioned, a little bit of a lot of guys, we don't talk about the things that we struggle with or the things that we're trying to battle. So for you working with athletes, many of them do struggle. What's the biggest thing that you see amongst the athletes that you work with as it relates to mental health?
I think it's just pressure. They feel a lot of to justify the fact that mom and dad spent a bunch of money on travel ball, and if they don't get a college scholarship, they're failures. If they don't get to post their humbled and blessed to commit tweet, all of their friends think less of them. And it's again, I'm just generalizing. I'm not saying that's how everybody feels, but the general vibe is there's a lot of pressure to commit, right? You spend all this time, effort, energy, money to become the best at your craft. And if you don't, get a big scholarship or go to a Power 4 school, now all of a sudden you are seen as a failure. And that's just not the case. Everybody's path is different and it all shakes out. So I think that's probably the biggest thing is they just feel the pressure to like either it's justify the dollars spent by their parents or justify like their identity like you said to I'm a baseball player and I'm going to go play college baseball. I would say that's probably the most common one I see from an athlete is and they don't a lot of times they don't say that I feel pressure. You can just tell when they're pressing or nervous or especially right now it's college commitment season time for us if you are a senior in baseball. A lot of junior and or senior, a lot of like the division ones are already sending out their commits. You're seeing everybody like I've lost track at this point, probably over a dozen commits in the last week or two. So if you're a senior and you don't have offers and you're not signing and all your friends are posting their humbled and blessed tweets, you get a little FOMO, you get a little, like I said, the ego hit, a little panic mode. And so usually it goes one of two ways. Either a kid says, screw it, I wasn't even really trying anyway. I didn't really, I didn't really want to play college baseball. And so that way they have an excuse to like say why they, get to play college baseball in their best effort. Or the other way, a kid gets super and, he says, oh yeah, watch this. And so I think a really good example of, I could list examples the other way, but I won't. But of the good way would be like McCade Brown. So McCade Brown he just made his major league debut. He didn't commit till his senior year until February. And so by all intents and purposes, like that's so far late, but he just went all in, knew he didn't have the offers that he wanted and just said, oh yeah, watch this and just crushed an off season and went from basically no offers to several Division 1 offers. Now at that point, there wasn't a bunch of money left. So it's all walk on type stuff. And a lot again, if you look at all the dollars spent in training and you get a walk on offer and your whole point was ROI on your dollars, like that's not a good kickback, but that was their frame of reference, trying to get to a good university and, play baseball and, as well as get a good education. So it kind of worked out for them that way.
Can you talk a little bit more? Because you mentioned resilience, and I know we've had a prior conversation about this, just kind of some of the things that you're seeing as it relates to younger athletes and their resilience. Maybe they didn't get the scholarship or they didn't get the playing time they wanted, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about what you're saying there?
I think it kind of comes down to it's a balance, right? Like you want to support your kid and protect them from failure, but as a parent you got to let them fail a little bit too, and as a coach you got to let them fail. But oftentimes we don't do that, whether it's we don't let a pitcher work himself out of a bad inning or whatever the situation may be. I see a lot that we don't let our kids fail. We try to protect, which is good. I mean, it's natural. I'm a parent. Like I don't want to see my kid fail. But my son's not playing shortstop, batting 3-hole. I'm going to go do it. I'm going to start my own team versus just like, hey, get to work. How can I get better? So, I mean, it's a balance, right? But I do think there is a component to letting an athlete fail and take that one way or the other. You know what I mean? And dig themselves out, take it as a learning lesson, or be a helicopter / bulldozer parent and try to prevent all hardships, which is not the way.
That's some of the things that I see as a therapist working with athletes is, the parents sometimes maybe embarrassed or ashamed to say, hey, my son has or daughter has anxiety or some depression or burnout, et cetera, which I understand it from the standpoint of what you're talking about. A lot of parents want to protect their son or daughter from the outside world. But I think it's important for us to think about these things. In middle school and high school, athletes kind of have a guide, somebody to be there to help them. But then that transition into college, it's, you're a little bit on your own. You've got your own schedule, you've got your own responsibilities. if you were a parent who has a high school athlete who's a senior that's getting ready to transition into college, what's something that you would want them to know or take more serious when it comes to that big transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're talking about a player that's going to go play in college, it's a job. So the thing that I always try to say to our athletes is I want them to be prepared. So I want them to go into college and be like, oh, this is it. Like, yeah, I was doing this in high school. I mean, from a schedule perspective, right? So a lot of times it's like 5:30 a.m. weights, and then it's class from 8 to 12, and then you've got team lunch or lunch, and then you've got team practice study tables like 5 to 8. It's a full-time job, right? So just trying to set the expectation of what college baseball is. Everybody likes the idea of playing college baseball. Not everybody likes the idea of putting in the work that's required. So just trying to get them used to the work and the schedule of what it takes. And also, the travel ball days are over, right? Where if you don't like your coach, you can just jump and go to the next travel team that says you're amazing and we want you on our team. Nobody cares about your high school ranking in college. You're all the same team. Nobody cares about your rank. So it's how can you help me win a baseball game right now? So just trying to get them ready, and it's the reality of the situation. And I think that's probably where the current travel baseball model is failing, is that anytime there's failure or something they don't like, they can just jump ship and go to the next one instead of really digging your heels in it. I mean, you look at all over the place and everybody's portaling and transferring all over the place, and it's just, I don't know. I think you got to prepare, like I said, kind of go back to earlier, is you got to let a kid fail and you got to let them work and figure it out from that standpoint. So when they get to college, they're not shell shocked when their coach is yelling at them, and now it's like, hey, you're not getting the job done. See ya.
I lived in Texas for a couple years, and it blew my mind, one, the scope of how serious people in Texas take their sports. But what was interesting is they had a 5U, 6U T-ball championship tournament in Houston, Texas. And I was just thinking about, okay, from a developmental standpoint, does this even make sense to put young athletes in those sorts of positions? It's almost, unfortunately, a little bit of a money grab. So it's like, hey, your son or daughter can join this group or this team, just give us a few $1,000 and we'll make sure that they get that D1 offer. So you're in the thick of it as it relates to baseball and travel league. Is that realistic? Is that really happening for parents or athletes who sign up for these travel league teams and they're guaranteed the scholarship? Is that happening? And the reason why I ask that is because there are some parents out there who believe that.
I mean, any program that's guaranteeing someone like a Division I scholarship is just selling you snake oil. It's so competitive at this point with NIL and the roster changes and the portal and the draft and how Major League Baseball, minor league baseball has shrunk their roster. So Division I level is so competitive at this point. So if any organization is selling that, it's a red flag. For the most part, like with our program on the travel side of things, we say, like, if you're with us for all 3 years and you do the work and you're a good teammate, we can pretty much guarantee you'll have an opportunity to play somewhere. It might not be where you think you should play or where you want to play. Maybe you won't go to a Kentucky or a Tennessee, but we'll have an opportunity for you to play college baseball if you put in the work and you do all the things. Just based on our network, there is a place for most high level players to play college somewhere. But yeah, I mean, the whole youth stuff is crazy. The only goal until you're probably like 13, it should just be to come back. It's if you don't come back, then your chances of playing long are not very high. So, my daughter's 12, my son's 9. Goal for my son is to have fun and come back and get a little bit better, for him to love it so much that he's the one asking to do stuff versus the other way around. And if he doesn't like it, like, so what? My daughter's 12, she's going to be seventh grade. It's a little bit different. It's like, okay, it's about that time. Like, oh, do we want to do this for real, or do we just want to kind of do it for fun? And I don't care either way. Is if you like it and you have fun competing, awesome. But at that 13, 14-year-old range, that seventh grade, eighth grade, freshman year, that's kind of like your sweet spot of, if you, unless you're just God's gift to the game and you don't put in the work, that, that seventh, eighth grade, freshman year are huge and critical for you to be set up to be successful for your sophomore, junior year, where you want to have that recruiting option.
As we wrap things up, we've kind of navigated your journey and some of the things that you would recommend athletes being intentional about, and then also the resilience and mental health in baseball. For an athlete out there who might be listening to this, they may be in junior high or high school, have aspirations to play at the college or professional level. If there was one piece of advice that you could give them that would have helped you in your journey, what would it be?
Just consistency. I think motivation stinks. Being motivated is crap. Like some days you're going to be motivated, some days you're not. Being consistent is what's going to help you. Showing up on the days you don't want to show up. Being good enough, I should say, when you don't feel good. Everybody's pretty good when they're feeling their best, but I think Roger Clemens kind of had a quote that he would have about 30 starts a year. 10 of those starts he was going to be on, and nobody can touch him when he's on. He's one of the best on the planet. And the whole thing was that he felt he should play games every year. 10 of those starts he would be okay, and he's good enough that when he's okay, he's going to win 6 of those starts. 10 of those starts he's going to feel terrible and be crap, and those are the ones that kind of separate. If you're a 14 to 15 game winner, you're pretty good. Like, you're going to have a lot of jobs. If you're a 20 game winner, you're in the Hall of Fame. And so those 10 starts, when you suck, so to speak, how can you find a way to get it done? So just consistency is showing up and choosing to do hard things. What do you do when people aren't looking? This is my coaches hate this. I'm sure of it, but one of the things I'll actually do is I'll drop a little wrapper, like a little Starburst wrapper, on my front door, and just to see who walks by it, who picks it up. There's no prize. It's just, do you maintain the standard or not? If you walk by a piece of trash in the parking lot, do you keep walking or do you go away? If I walk past a dumbbell and the logo's flipped upside down, do I even notice it? Am I looking for it, or do I straight it out? And so that's the stuff I would say is the details matter, and consistency. So just finding a way to show up every day, even on the days you don't feel like it, and remembering your why. Big picture. It's pretty mushy and wishy-washy, but honestly, the older I get, the guys that I see that make it aren't the ones that necessarily have the best talent. It's usually a combination of talent, work ethic, and a little bit of intestinal fortitude.
My dad has mentioned, in the past, everything that's gold doesn't mean it's good, or something along those lines. And that just me thinking about, when you mentioned it, transfer portal, all of the TikTok, social media, and all the athletes have it now. And it's just because you put up a highlight reel of all your good plays doesn't necessarily mean you're doing all of the good things, as you mentioned, when nobody's looking. And I think that's also, it has me thinking too. The last thing I want to ask you is, you mentioned, the wrapper being in front of the door, the logo upside down. I'd imagine as competition gets more elite, that's what you mean as far as being consistent with detail.
Yeah, I mean, the farther down you go, the more talent is going to separate it, right? There's going to be the guy that throws 92 in high school and destroys everybody, but as you go up, everybody throws that hard. Everybody can run fast, everybody can hit. It's the little things. It's just day in, day out. I think it's just a mindset. Do you uphold the standard? Do you only do things when people are watching? Or because if you're only when people are watching, uh, then who are you really doing it for? You know what I mean? And so one stupid thing that I do is I pick up pennies. If I see pennies on the ground, I, I know picking up a penny isn't going to make me rich, uh, but it's the fact that I know that everybody else will walk right by that penny and not pick it up. I'm willing to do the work that someone else isn't, because I know what's on the other side of that work. And I just think that's, if I was trying to instill anything with our athletes, it's that, pick up the penny, do it when nobody's watching, show up when you don't want to.
For those listening, and let me say this too, I appreciate the work that you're doing, because as we've talked previously, it's so important for us to be able to guide some of these younger athletes into what being elite is, or that consistency that you mentioned, but also teaching them the right things. I was once a coach, and the things that I would see sometimes blew my mind of what some of these athletes were learning. They got all the gimmicks and tools and toys out, but it's like, at the end of the day, if you can't move and if you can't compete without those things, those toys don't matter. So I appreciate everything that you're doing, because from everything that I hear, everything that I see, it's really trying to create that foundation for athletes so that once they are older, that they have something to lean back on. If there are any athletes, parents listening to this and they're interested in K's Academy, how can they find you?
Yeah, so K's Training Academy online. We're on the socials at Coach KS Academy on Instagram, TikTok, uh, Facebook, and Twitter. So Coach KS Academy, and then my personal Instagram is just my name at Josh Kauten, Kauten.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on Coats and Conversation.
Appreciate you, Kendrick. Thank you.